welcome everybody, and welcome back to another episode of CISO Talk. Mitch Ashley, CTO with TechStrong Group and principal with TechStrong Research, and Jennifer, JJ Manila, my co-host with the show. Jennifer, JJ, whatever I'm calling you today, welcome. It's good to be doing this with you again. How are you doing?
I'm great. I think I decided earlier today that I'm going to be Diana through this day. Yes, at least till 8 o'clock at night.
Nothing like mixing it up. Okay. All right, Diana. No, I'm just kidding, JJ. Hey, this is, every episode is special. This one I think is even a little extra special because of our guest and someone that you've known for a long time, Chuck Kesler. I'll let you introduce Chuck and then he can tell us a little bit more about himself. You want to just start out, JJ, with your connection with Chuck?
Yeah. I've known Chuck. I should think about these before we have the guests on, so I can tell you exactly how long we've known each other. But I'm going to start now and rewind, and then Chuck, ask you to kind of fill in a little bit here. So right now you're the CISO at Pendo. Before that, and I think when we met through ISSA, you were the CISO at Duke Health System. And then I know before that, we've had some conversations about some of the security work you were doing as a consultant with Symantec and some of the prior things there. So do you want to kind of move us back forward through that progression, talk about how you ended up where you are now?
Yeah, thanks, JJ. And thanks, Mitch. For really appreciate the invitation to be here today. Hopefully I can do this podcast justice. I haven't done many of these, so apologize for, I'm going to try to be interesting. I don't know if I can be. We'll see. I'll do.
You already are. You're good. You're on good. Okay.
Great. So JJ, I don't know exactly how long we've known each other. It's more than 10 years. I'm just going to leave it at that. That's a reasonable amount of time. Yeah, I joined Pendo about four and a half years ago. Prior to Pendo, I was a CISO for Duke University Health System for, I think it was 7 years. And prior to that, I spent about 6 years working with Symantec's advisory services consulting practice. And I go back further than that. I actually started my career more on the technical side as a systems administrator, moving up into IT management and eventually security. So I've got, 30 plus years actually doing things in tech in general. And it's been, an interesting journey. I like to point out oftentimes that I've been connected to the internet since the mid 80s before most people even had a clue what the internet was. I think the very first time I connected to the internet was probably about 1986 from a little Unix mini computer sitting in a university office. Just connecting with other folks at other universities. So it was a lot of fun back then. But to see it all, see all this technology grow, connect the entire world, and then, security becoming a thing that we had to worry about, in the early days, it's like, people were just playing around. But, this became a very serious thing, obviously, once the rest of the world was connected and we started using this technology for taking care of patients. For example, when I was at Duke, we have that entire enterprise connected, everything from the MRI machines to the IV pumps to, all the things that are helping to diagnose, the illnesses that our patients are dealing with. So, obviously security was a huge concern for Duke, which is the reason why they brought me in there. It was an interesting transition going from that industry in healthcare, again, taking care of millions of patients per year, in a highly regulated environment, to a very fast growing software as a services company at Pendo. When I joined Pendo 4.5 years ago, again, we were about a 250 person company, had already grown quite a bit. Pendo at that point, I think, was right at 5 years old. So we're hitting our 10-year anniversary this year. But we grew from 5 people to 250 when I joined in that first 5 years, and now we're close to 900 people now. We're considered one of those tech unicorns, and it's a very different environment than working at a place like Duke Health, where, again, very large organization taking care of a lot of patients, a lot of regulatory concerns, a lot of traditional IT infrastructure to a fully cloud native company that was, never has had a rack of servers sitting in a closet or anything like that. Everything we've always done has been sitting in the cloud. And again, a very software development oriented organization. We have to move and adapt with the market very quickly. We're deploying new versions of our software multiple times per week. Something very different again from what I experienced at Duke. So that was definitely an interesting transition to have to, kind of do a mind shift to, from a very slow A very slow moving organization to one that moves very quickly to adapt and take advantage of opportunities in the market.
And the word agile comes to mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Today's kind of a SaaS cloud-based software company. I would imagine too, and this is something that JJ and I frequently talk about, the intersection of security, software, and software development. You have the added factor of kind of mobile. Right? Your apps, are about measuring mobile. Not to go too much into Pendo, we don't have to do that. But you yourself are dealing with customers in the mobile world, which introduces, I would imagine, some unique considerations, especially given you came up through IT and probably had BYOD and dealt with all those issues. Now you're creating that software coming into those networks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting. So our platform, we started as a web-centric platform. So helping our customers instrument their web applications to understand user journeys through those applications. But over time, we realized that, hey, yes, mobile is part of that user journey as well. So Pendo actually acquired a company that had a complementary product at the time. This was roughly, I think it was 2018 or so. So it was actually before I arrived at Pendo, or shortly before. And since we've actually kind of redeveloped that entire platform, but essentially it's an SDK that gets embedded into our customers' applications that helps instrument those applications. So, the interesting aspect of that is, you kind of think about web applications and mobile applications and how they're different. Yeah, I mean, with a web application, it is a very dynamic thing. Again, we can deploy multiple versions of that in a day. With a mobile application, on the other hand, it is an app that gets built and deployed into an app store. And so the customers then, update from the app store. Maybe they update as new versions of that application become available. But in many cases, they don't, right? A lot of people actually don't turn on auto updates, right? So that application might live on their device many, weeks, months, years without ever actually being updated. So our software is going into those customer applications. If you think about our web application, our agent that goes into a web application, again, we can update that multiple times per week. In the mobile world, we have an SDK that is going to get embedded into that customer application. And we don't know when it's going to get updated. So, we do have to think about, while we have a lot of processes to try to prevent security vulnerabilities in our own product, if we do identify one in our agent, we can very quickly correct it, because all we have to do is deploy a new version. With those mobile SDKs, that's a little bit more of a difficult challenge, because those applications with that embedded SDK can live on a user device for a much longer period of time. So it definitely introduces some different sets of challenges where those updates are a lot more out of your control in the hands of a consumer that may or may not actually care about updating that application.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Because you did come up from a highly on-prem, heavy on-prem environment with a lot of biomedical devices. And it's not a small health system. So it was a large volume of stuff you were dealing with there. I think we made a joke about a wireless or an internet connected wheelchair at some point. And I think Chuck said, no, we actually have those. But I'm kind of curious, moving from that to someplace like Pendo that's, or any environment that's, cloud native and you don't have the on-prem infrastructure. As a CISO, what has been your transition? What's changed for you and your process in terms of how you create or update policies, the cadence with which that might happen, and maybe who's involved in that? What all have you seen shift or stay the same?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. I mean, I actually think in many ways it simplifies the world for me, because there are a lot of things that I had to worry about from an infrastructure perspective now that are just taken care of for me. All of our services live out in the cloud. So actually, I don't care where my end users are at. They could be sitting here at the office. They could be sitting at home. They could be sitting in a coffee shop or a hotel. I have to design with the assumption that my developers could be anywhere in the world. versus, that more infrastructure centric view of the world where, okay, yes, we're going to assume everybody is on-prem and they're working in an office or in a hospital room or operating room or something of that nature. So again, just kind of heading down the zero trust route here a little bit, I guess, with this part of the discussion. But, from an architectural perspective, just to say, look, I'm not going to trust that, this network that the device is connected to, just because it comes from this particular network, I'm going to trust any of it. I'm going to base that trust more on the identity, the authorization and authentication process of the user connecting to the application that sits out in the cloud. And I might look at the device that it's coming from and say, okay, is this a managed device? Yes, that's part of the equation as well. But again, in that more traditional network infrastructure world, definitely, we had the part on the outside, soft and chewy on the inside, even though we had done a lot of work in terms of segmenting that network. As JJ, I know you worked on a couple of projects with us, so you know how complicated that network was and how difficult it was to, at a network of that scale to actually manage segmentation in a meaningful way. Versus just, again, assuming that, look, I have applications deployed in a public cloud that are going to be connected to, basically through that internet connection that the person is connected to. So I'm not going to trust just because you're coming from a particular IP address. I'm going to trust more on the authentication, again, the MFA obviously for everything. And then in certain cases, again, looking at device trust, is this a managed device that the connection is coming from? So for me, it's made that zero trust aspect of things was just more of a natural motion for us. I mean, it's kind of how we built the enterprise. And when I look at a company again like Pendo that grew so quickly, we were able to do that because we didn't have to invest heavily in building all this infrastructure up front. Again, we were consuming cloud resources as we scaled. So we didn't have to go get, again, capital to build, big network infrastructure, racks of servers and things like that. We were just paying as our customer base grew, and we gave everybody a laptop and we gave them a good network to connect to. So, it allowed us again to grow a company much more quickly that way. So, yeah, I mean, I think that if you're building a new company today, there's sort of a natural motion to go down that route versus, the more traditional way of having to build all that infrastructure like you would have in the past.
And Chuck, you mentioned, developers could be working from anywhere. You mentioned, the managed devices and possibly unmanaged being the other kind of BYOD model. Not talking about, your current environment, but just your feelings as a CISO and throughout your history in working with organizations. How do you kind of weigh the pros and cons of BYOD models and whether you're going to let people access things from a personal device and to what degree and what things? What's your kind of like risk assessment for that look like?
It really depends on the organization and the mission and the data, et cetera. I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to that. I do think you have to evaluate it in that context. But ultimately, yes, I mean, I think you have to look at it from the perspective of if you're going to allow BYOD, and there may be some cases where that's perfectly fine, being able to do some sort of posture assessment of the device to say, okay, yes, this device is at least patched reasonably well. It's not compromised. It's running, some sort of, antivirus or EDR agent or something of that nature. It meets our minimum security requirements to be connected to this application or to this network. I mean, I think that's sort of the basis for getting comfortable with a BYOD type approach. The reality is that you can't. I think it's very difficult for any organization most organizations these days, at least, to completely rule out things like connecting to email services from a personal phone. So, there's some things like that you might be a little bit more open to allowing versus connecting to a production database, again, from that personal device. So again, as part of the risk assessment, looking at the data, looking at what might be appropriate on certain types of devices. But again, if you're going to do BYOD, I think, doing an MDM on a BYOD device. I mean, that was actually something that we did at Duke, but it was an opt-in. And if you didn't opt into doing it, we limited you to what applications you could get access to. So yes, we allowed access to email, but we did not allow access to the clinical systems, without having the MDM application or the device enrolled in MDM, so that we could, again, do that deeper posture assessment.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I remember doing some work for the University of Colorado hospital system, and the security team, in working with doctors, doctors kind of had the ultimate power, right, in the organization. And some didn't like security and didn't want to do things the security way. And in a way, it's not the same, but a bit of an analogy to developers, right? Developers like their own environment. They like control. They want to use the tools they want to use. They don't want your stuff getting in the way. So it seems like both of those may be the same, maybe some unique challenges. Talk about that as a user, part of your user community, people who really you need security, but they don't necessarily want, or maybe even can't force them to do some of those things.
Yeah, it's an interesting analogy. Certainly doctors and nurses, people that are taking care of patients, you do want to enable them to do their work in a way that is comfortable for them and allows them to be effective at that, because ultimately what they're doing is saving lives. And oftentimes I would try to put when I was thinking about a request from a healthcare provider for, hey, we want to do this, we want to install this application, we want to use something in a slightly different way. I would try to look at it from the perspective, okay, is this, let me think about the patient that they're taking care of. What if that patient is me? What if it's a family member? What if it's a friend? Okay, yeah, if this is going to help them be more effective in delivering care to that patient, you have to weigh, the security concerns against that as well. Obviously, we have compliance and regulatory issues that we have to deal with. So there's a lot that goes into that mix in a healthcare environment to making a determination. But you definitely have to listen to the people who are actually using the technology and understanding, look, is this going to affect them in a significantly negative way that is going to interrupt their workflows or make it more difficult for them to get their work done? I think a great analogy I can use for that is when we implemented multi-factor authentication at Duke Health, and we did this fairly, early in the grand scheme of things. We implemented it back in, I think it was 2015. We thought very heavily about, okay, what does this look like in the clinical environment? Do we want to be in a situation where doctors and nurses are having to pull out, a phone to do MFA every time they do something on the clinical workstation that they're connecting to? No, we probably don't, because even if, that only takes 15 seconds, those 15 seconds can make a difference, a big difference in actually taking care of a patient, particularly in a life critical situation. So, we looked at, okay, what in that particular case, we're going to be a little bit less restrictive or a little bit more open to not doing MFA in internal applications when you're connected to the internal network versus remote access, and we're always going to do MFA, right? So those are the sorts of decisions that we went through there. Now, flipping that over to the developers. Yeah, I mean, developers are creators. In many ways, doctors and nurses are creators as well, right? You're doing creative work to some degree. We like to think about it as science or engineering, but there's a lot of thought that has to go into the next step that you're going to take, and the right tool to get you to that next step is not necessarily always the tool that you currently have. Sometimes it's like, okay, there's something new coming that I want to take advantage of. I'll go ahead and bring in the AI part of the conversation now. So one of the hot things at the moment is using things like GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT to help you write code. So, okay, this can help you. This can make you a more effective developer, right? And maybe it eventually puts you out of a job. There's that too. But there's no denying the fact that it can help someone create code more quickly. Now, theoretically, you're not just taking that code and tossing it in. Usually, the developer's actually doing some work. But we want to be able to find a way to make it so that they can do those things in a safe manner. So we do want to put some guardrails up and help them understand what are the safe ways to use these new tools. So, but so we want to know about them, and we want to be able to have a conversation about them. We don't want them to just kind of run off and do something without us knowing about it. But one of the reasons why people run off and do something without telling you about it is that you've told them no too many times, right? So you want to build relationships with them, and I think that's very key in working with the developers anywhere. Certainly here at Pendo, we've invested a lot in building those relationships so they understand. Look, we're not here just to tell you no. We're here to help you find a way to get something done. So let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish. Let's talk about the risks that might be associated with that. Let's see if those risks are reasonable for the business value that we're going to get out of this, and what we can do to mitigate those risks. So I've always found that if we try to go into the conversations in a constructive fashion versus just taking these stance up front that we're going to tell you no, we're going to tell you no, 5 times until you go away, but instead say, okay, we hear you. We want to talk about some risks and some ways that we can do this safely. I usually find that people are a little bit more engaged in those conversations at that point if we don't have that history of being the department of no.
So Chuck, Mitch and I always like to ask the "what's bugging you" question, and I especially think it's funny with you because you're always such a upbeat. You always have such an upbeat, happy demeanor. Like I never have heard you complain about anything, and I've never heard you really rant on anything. So I'm interested to let Mitch wind you up on developers using AI and just see what happens here.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe I don't know if that's what's bugging you, or you have privacy issues, just like different, but a lot of them that you had in the medical field. Yeah, you're helping people track customer journeys, talk about privacy information. What kind of things keep you up at night? What's bugging you?
Yeah, I mean, again, yes, I try to take an optimistic view of the world. That's just who I am. But yes, things move very quickly, and it is, there's a lot of risk out there, and we may not fully understand all the risks sometimes. So I think that's an aspect of being a security leader, that you have to find your personal comfort level with hey, there's always going to be a certain number of things that are just going to be running out ahead of us, and it can be very disconcerting at times. And I think certainly looking at how quickly the world has kind of grabbed a hold of the generative AI stuff over the last few months. I mean, like everybody, I've personally played around with a little bit, and I've seen how powerful it is. So, I mean, on the other hand, I also get how it could be misused and how it could present issues for us if we're not, again, building good guardrails around that. So, I mean, I would be lying if I said I wasn't worried about that. Again, I'm trying to approach it from the standpoint of finding a way to enable the business to get value out of that in a way that we're also, kind of managing the risks. I have had to tell some people to slow down a little bit on some things because we were getting a little bit ahead of ourselves on that. But again, that's my job, is to try to navigate those waters. The other one that has certainly been a challenge for us is we are working on a FedRAMP program right now, and that is a very complicated piece. And certainly, I know anybody that's done, JJ, I know you work with people that are doing CMMC and things of that nature. Wow, and just to figure out exactly what the federal government is looking for is just it is a never-ending battle. The goalposts seem to be moving a lot on that. So, that's definitely something that has been keeping me up at night, making me, pull hair out, I guess. Fortunately, I still have reasonably full head of hair there, but that's definitely has been, getting me a little worked up here lately.
Federal government and pulling hair out, I think, go in the same sentence quite often.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you would think, because I'm responsible for CMMC compliance. with the client. And it's one of those things where you would think, with all of the jokes we have about how slow the government moves on things, that they wouldn't get halfway into something and then pivot and change it 90 degrees and then get another 20% the way into it and then completely redo the whole thing. And so we're at like basically the third revision of something before there's even an audit committee that can certify you against it. But that's been the life we're living recently. Hasn't been fun. Chuck, I'm curious, when you, having never managed, developers or development team, when you say that, one of the key points, which makes sense to me, is, building relationships there so that you have some trust and you're not always that department of no, and you can work together for solutions. Is that something that you do as a formalized strategy, or is it just an ad hoc, gut feeling, we're going to listen to you and open door, come talk?
Well, I think it's a little of both. I think part of it is, yes, how you approach the organization. And it's not just the developers, by the way, it's also our product organization, because they're the ones that ultimately set the agenda for our developers and determining what we're going to be building. And so, for example, we may determine, hey, we just had a dependent bot scan run and we've got like all these dependencies need to be updated. And some of them are easy, some of them are hard. The hard ones are like, okay, that's going to have to go into the backlog, and then we're going to have to negotiate around, product features that are being built and ensure that we don't lose track of those things. So it's not just, again, working with the developers, but also with our product managers to understand, look, yes, we're all about building new features in the product, but we have to make sure this tech debt is addressed as well. So, yes, part of it is just being accessible, being connected, whether it's, I'm actually in the office here right now, but, also we're a very Slack-based organization. So lots of conversations happen there. I have kind of a love-hate relationship with that, because I think it's amazing how quickly we can connect and discuss something. On the other hand, that can also mean it's very distracting and very hard to get anything done and be focused on something. But, generally speaking, just trying to make sure that we are being responsive where we can, or, if we're, hey, look, we've just got a lot, even as a security team, we get a question from the product organization or from a developer about something, and like we might not be able to get to it right away, but at least trying to set expectations as to when we are going to be able to get back to them. So just trying to be responsive, trying to be transparent about what we're working on, and sharing both ways, right? That we understand what their constraints are and they understand what our constraints are. Are we always perfect at that? Absolutely not. Plenty of times we could have done a better job communicating or building a particular relationship, but it's just something you have to be intentional about. And again, through a combination of sort of formal structures, I think every organization sort of develops that, that governance model, if you will, for, how you're going to, perform your business. In this case, our business is building software. And so trying to make sure that we are plugged in at the reasonable places in those processes so that security has a voice there. But at the same time, also building advocates so that people recognize, hey, maybe we need to have our security team, here for this part of the conversation. We have played around with security champions programs as a way to do that. And we actually, we had that formalized a little while back. We actually had to put it on pause because we felt like we were not investing the right resources in that. But the general idea there is to find those people that in the organization that have an interest in security and want to help us, in their particular role, help be an advocate for security by giving them some additional tools and, information that they can use. So we had that a little bit formalized in the past, had to pull it a little bit back, but we still informally use that method as well to ensure that we're, again, just taking advantage of grassroots efforts where we can in the organization.
And
I'm curious about, I'm sorry, JJ, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was just going to throw out there that I saw a stat on the news this morning that said post-COVID, 50% of people are returning or are being forced to return in office full time. And then there was some percentage that was in the 20s, I think high 20s, that was working remotely. And then it was like 12% that was hybrid, meaning they go into an office sometimes. And I just thought that was a weird, had you asked me to make up numbers, those are not the numbers I would have. That's drastically off from what I would have guessed is going on right now. So I just thought that was interesting. You're in an office. Mitch is actually feigning working from home today.
I'm green screening working from home.
Yeah. And, and on that note, I mean, we're very much a hybrid company, and we do have very nice office space here. And but people choose to come here. On an average day, we probably have about 50% of our workforce that comes to the office. So
it's a nice space
because they like being here. They like, I like to say I come here because I like being around the other people in the organization, but it's just a very nice space. It's comfortable to be in, lots of great, you can't see it from this room, but lots of nice views of downtown Raleigh. We have a terrace up on the 19th floor that's open, and as JJ knows, we have a pizza oven, all those nice amenities here as well. So
and the hidden room.
And the hidden room, that's right, the speakeasy. So, so at any rate, yeah, it's just a nice place to be, and I think that's where companies that this is my personal opinion. Compelling people or telling people that to be in the office is one thing, but making a place where people want to be, that's really where success can come, and giving people the flexibility to decide when is it okay to be at home versus when you need to be in the office. I think flexibility is what a lot of people are really ultimately looking for, including obviously security people. That we all appreciate that in our lives.
Chuck, it's interesting now that you've been kind of working in the software world as a security person. A lot of organizations, a lot of CISOs, security teams are sort of faced with that DevSecOps, supply chain, software supply chain security, all these kind of software things, securing the DevOps platforms and tools, and how much to get involved in that. We're not software architects, but we are security people. What have you learned making that transition to yourself about the kind of team that you hire? When do you get directly involved? When do you kind of be involved in touch points in the process? What have you learned doing the job you're doing right now as a CISO?
Yeah, I mean, I came in here not as a software developer. I mean, I've started my career as a systems administrator, so I've written my share of shell scripts and Perl scripts. That's a very different thing than developing the type of application that Pendo is. And when I was doing that, I used to think I was really great at make files. So, for those in the audience that are old Unix sysadmins,
I've heard that in a while. Yeah. Yes, but yes,
but this whole Git world, I do not understand all the mechanics. I mean, I get that conceptually, I understand it, but how people actually use some of those tools, I personally don't understand. Or can't fully appreciate, right? I don't have the muscle memory in my fingertips for it. Versus I still have the muscle memory for VI, right?
Keep that escape button handy, right? Escape.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, wow.
And HJK and L.
Yes.
But I think learning what they do, learning how they work, and again, kind of from the same side, our cloud operations team, learning how they work. One thing that's really interesting is watching how that SRE skill set is kind of evolved in the operations side of it. So our infrastructure is also code, right? That's how we build our infrastructure. It's all code based. And it goes through the same sort of change management and build processes that our actual code does, which is great from a security perspective because you're not counting on somebody there that's sort of manually clicking boxes to build this cloud environment. It's all code. So you can scan it. You can make sure it's gone through change management. You have all the audit logs, tests, et cetera, to do that same sort of build process. So as a security person, understanding those things has been important, but also hiring people that if they don't necessarily have those skill sets themselves, they want to learn those things. And I think that's actually one thing as security professionals is we always have to be learning, and that those that want to go learn these new things, they absolutely can. And that's a great, one of the great things about being in a place like Pendo is that, yes, there's lots of opportunity to go learn, these cutting edge new ways of doing things. So that's actually one of the things I'm seeing that's different in the security operations team, for example. In security operations, I have 3 teams, by the way. I have security operations, a product security team, and a compliance team. So security operations in the past, which would have been very focused on more traditional, just looking at, a SIM and kind of, reacting to alerts and things like that. A lot more so, we're now actually developing our own code. We're actually building tools. We're automating things. So it's a slightly different approach, and more like that SRE in the ops world. So I think that's where our skill sets in security are evolving in that exact same direction. And I saw actually just today, Microsoft released a chat GPT tool that's for security, right? So that's all coming as well. The bottom line is all of this technology, all the ways that we're working as security professionals is evolving. And that's one of the exciting things about being in a place, that is trying to keep up with all the new technology, is that we have to, as security professionals, run after the same sorts of things, which means that we're going to have job security. We're going to know, we're actually using all those technologies that the developers are using, that the operations people are using. So it makes us more effective as security people as well.
So for a security person who might not be fully up on what SRE is, how would you describe engineer tools?
Sorry, yeah, great point. So that term, I think, started with Google, site reliability engineers. So again, really a heavy focus on automation. Again, automatically building environments through code, not hands-on, right? Not racking and stacking servers and installing operating systems, but writing code that defines how that tech stack is going to be built in the cloud. So, but also automating a lot of that so that hey, if, for example, you've got load issues and you need to scale the environment up, like you automate that scale up process, or, hey, we need to scale it back down. So, those things scale up and scale down automatically. That skill set from the SRE is what kind of makes all that happen. The same token, just automating all that HA type of work, right? That's the sort of stuff that SREs are responsible for. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Very good. Very much so.
So when it comes to tools like ChatGPT, one of the things through the various consulting engagements and clients that keeps getting asked is, should we block access to these things while you're on the corporate network or on a corporate device? And I think Chuck knows me well enough to know my answer to that is no, because they're always going to find another way to get to it, and then you just won't see it when they do. But I'm curious what you guys are doing for education around your user population with those types of tools. Is that part of your security awareness training? Is it something you're dealing with just with the product management developers, or how are you tackling that currently?
Yeah, I would actually say it's become part of our security, not necessarily part of our formal security awareness training at the moment, but more so just part of various outreach efforts that are going on. So we have a biweekly town hall, and actually the next one of those is tomorrow, and that is actually going to be one of the topics that's covered in the town hall. We've covered it as a topic in some of our engineering town halls as well in the past, just to help people understand. Look, there's a process that we have to go through to vet these tools from a security, privacy, and legal perspective. And we understand that people are going to be interested in using those tools, and they have some, safe use cases for them that don't involve sending proprietary information or customer data. There's some gray area here, but please just wait. Let us finish our due diligence before you start using this for any sort of corporate purposes. But a lot of it is just reminding people that look, we do have established processes for vetting and onboarding any sort of new tool. So it's not not something different than we would be doing for anything else. It just happens to be very very newsworthy right now because everybody's talking about it.
So I'm going to dig a little further into that, just playing devil's advocate. So when you have something that's that accessible and is basically a browser interaction and experience, how do you train? What kind of education are you doing to explain to people that is a tool?
Yeah. Again, what we do is we try to remind people how these things could go wrong for the company. Hey, you think this is innocent? I'm just going to take this code that happens to be a proprietary code and put it in here. But in doing so, you might be creating a legal liability for the company because you've taken something that is proprietary information, given it to a unvetted vendor. We're not sure exactly, from a legal perspective, if we own the code that it gives back to us after you've done, or, if you've asked it to write code for something, do we actually own that code? So it's reminding people those sorts of complications exist. Do people hear those things? Hopefully, but we also are realistic enough to know that not everybody is going to fully appreciate those things. But we just do what we can in trying to continuously talk about that and ensure that people know that we are understand that there is an important business value to be achieved with these tools, and that we are working on finding ways to use them in an appropriate fashion for the company. And in the meantime, just asking, please slow down just a little bit while we work through this.
I have
something that I've learned that's just in last couple of days to help people understand some of the risks is just ask ChatGPT to write your own bio. So write a bio for Mitchell Ashley, and you'll see that, yes, some of it's right. Some of it is, I was CISO at whatever. I'm like, I never worked at that company. So you realize that, there are some things that it's good at, but it also, while it all sounds truthful, it isn't necessarily accurate or truthful. But some of it is. So it's still early to have a high level of trust in some of the output.
Right.
I wrote a chat. I write a monthly post with Packet Pushers, like an Ask Me Anything column. And one of the questions was, they told me my book was too long. Can they just learn wireless security from ChatGPT? So I said that, I don't know. So I went on to ChatGPT and typed a few basic questions, and the answers were, so then I scored them like with 1 to 5 stars. And there were, it wasn't great. Like if it was, a lot of the information was old, it didn't know how to parse together new information with the old information and what superseded what, and then it left out whole chunks of things sometimes. So yeah, even just the basic, ask it the normal basic stuff, you'll start to see where some of the gaps are. If I can, because we're going to be coming right up on RSA, and Chuck, we talked to Britta and Casey recently, and got the dish on some of the stuff happening. So I'm curious, because I think you are going to make it there this year.
That's my plan. Yeah.
Is there anything specific you're looking forward to?
Wow. Actually, outside of the amazing technology and operations track, which I'm lucky enough to be part of the program committee for, and I think we have a lot of great sessions. I think the main thing I'm looking for or excited about is just the opportunity to see people network in person again, see some folks I haven't seen in a few years. Last time I was at RSA was February of 2020. So obviously right before the pandemic, and not a lot of, in-person contact with a lot of, colleagues from outside the local areas. Seeing my, colleagues here in the Raleigh area a lot more frequently than that. But yeah, just looking forward to reconnecting with the larger community and seeing what cool new things are out there these days.
What did you say, Mitch? 40,000 of our closest friends?
Closest friends, all together in one conference.
And me being a huge introvert, like that's just frightening, but also, okay, it's kind of cool. You do miss it to some degree as well.
Aren't we all insecure?
Yeah, I think most of us are introverts, I guess, right? We just pretend to be extroverts when we have to.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is we can be social. We just choose not to.
Exactly.
Left to our own devices will not be, but
that's right.
Well, Chuck, It's been fascinating and we appreciate your time. Unfortunately, we're running out of time here. We could go on for another hour and a half. It's been very cool that you've had this journey from kind of IT operations sysadmin through being a leader into a CISO role, into a CISO in a software company. And I think a lot of people can learn from what you shared with us today. So as always, JJ brings that perspective too of understanding what we know today and what we're going to have to learn for tomorrow as a security professional. And it's interesting to hear both of you talk about it. as well. So thank you for joining us, JJ. Thank you for being a fantastic partner in crime here on CISO Talk. And it's been fun, and we look forward to having you back. We need you on some more panels, Chuck.
Happy to do it anytime. Thank you.
Okay. You heard it. I just heard a commitment there, so we're good. All right. JJ, any parting thoughts?
No, just excited about this reboot and excited to get to see Chuck and all of our future guests. And thanks everybody for watching or listening.
Fantastic. Well, check us out on techstrong.tv. That's where we show up in video form. You can also check us out at CISOTalkPodcast.com, as well as on your favorite podcasting platforms. Lots of great ways to listen and watch. So we thank you, everybody, for joining us today. And thanks to Chuck for being with us on behalf of JJ and myself. We'll see you on our next episode.